move around too much. Okay, first of all, Tyrone, say your name and spell it.
My name's Tyrone Davis, Tyrone Davis.
And how long have you been in radio?
Oh my God, 53 years.
Wow. So when did you get started in radio?
1972
Where were you?
in Laurel, Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
And how much of your career has been in Mississippi?
A little less than half. Well, a lot more. A little less than half. Yeah, probably about 20 years or so. Yeah.
Gotcha. So you've seen Mississippi through
Yeah.
all the years.
Yeah. I worked on the Gulf Coast and Hattiesburg and Jackson, so worked in the three biggest markets in Mississippi. Yeah.
Good deal. Well, okay, so we're here to talk about Katrina.
Okay.
And you were working on the coast during that time.
I moved to Gulfport from Memphis in 2004 to take a job at a radio station to do afternoon drive. And Katrina came the next year. And it's been a while since I've been in a hurricane, and so I didn't leave. So what I thought enough to leave where I was living, because I was living right off Cow and Lorraine Road, if you've ever been to Gulfport. And it's a little bridge there, it goes up like that, and the water's right there. But my house is right here. It's no longer sitting here because Katrina really destroyed it, and that's what my house was, and had 8 feet of water in that house that night. And lucky I weren't there because I probably would have died.
No.
And then the pole fell on it.
Tell me about so you had probably heard that something was coming in.
Oh yeah.
Walk me through those days leading up to when you finally said, we're going to leave the house.
Okay. First of all, we're at the radio station, so we were following this storm, okay? And the storm just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I guess a day before Katrina hit, I was married to another wife then. Okay, so I told her, and she had a cousin that lived in the Orange Grove area. Because where we lived, it was, light poles and things, but where she lived, everything was on the ground, her cousin. So we left a day before it hit and went to stay with him. You know what? I think it was the same. We left that morning and it hit later. Maybe we left around 10, 11 o'clock that day. And the wind was not up to what, people were stirring. And that's when we decided to go.
Now, what was it that finally made you say, all right, no, we're not going to stay at the house?
I just looked at how close we were to that water, to the bayou. The bayou that we were at, it led out to the Gulf. So if the water swell, it's going to swell that water because the surge comes from the Gulf. So all things that are inlet that go to the Gulf, it swells. So that's what made me want to leave.
So tell me about when the storm comes in and you guys are riding it out at your family's house. Mm-hmm. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? What did it sound like?
I'm hearing something like a freight train. I guess it started about 4 a.m. and it's like a freight train hollering woo all that day. And it started about 3:30, 4 o'clock, and it ended about 4:30, 5 o'clock, all day long. And we were boarded up pretty good, but I looked out and I could see, things happening out there because he had his house boarded up. We could look through cracks like this, and you saw sheetrock and planks coming off the roof, and stuff was happening. Stuff flying down the street. It was dangerous.
What was going through your mind during all that?
Nothing, because I was with family and I had my wife and my kids there, and I thought we were pretty safe. I did, because the house that were around us were safe. You could see houses from a distance, and they were all safe. The shingles was coming off the houses. I didn't think that was so bad. They were flying everywhere. I thought I was safe.
When you walked out and saw what had happened, whether it was in your neighborhood or out and about,
okay, what
went through your mind?
When the storm finally stopped, let's get in the car, let's ride and see. We had no idea what had happened because, it wasn't that bad where we were. We could get in the car and drive. Mm-hmm. So we left Orange Grove to get on Highway 49, and that's when we knew. There were power poles and everything laying across the street. Everything was crazy. So I was trying to make it back to my apartment. I was renting a house, my house, which I did. And when I got back to my house, it looked like everything looked normal. I finally, you drive like this around the light poles. You were scared to hit them because you thought they were live. And it took me about 2 hours to get there. And everything was normal. It looked normal until I started touching stuff. And it was all soaking wet. All my clothes were hanging up, they were soaking wet. And I just happened to look up and there was a line up there. So a week left, it was horrible.
How much water did your house take on?
8 feet. It's up taller than I am and all the way up to the ceiling. It was it's a line up there. It was horrible.
And it was just a 1-story.
Yeah, 1-story house. The big house it was horrible. I had 3-4 bedrooms. It was horrible. The house was wooden. It's an older structure. It tilted it.
Wow.
It tilted it. They tore it down there too. It wasn't any good after that.
Talk about some of the people that you knew at the time and things that happened to them on the coast.
I knew a lot of people. I knew people that died in the storm. I knew people that had a party. We had some apartments called Water Edge Apartments, right on the water on the Gulf Coast. Those people didn't leave. They had a party and they all died. That's what I hear. Now, I know some of them died. And, there were just horror stories of people who didn't go, who were floating on logs and calling for help on top of roofs and everything all through the night. Now, the difference between ours and New Orleans, after the storm, our water went right back in the Gulf. It just receded. It receded. New Orleans water stayed there. Ours didn't. If you could make it to the next morning, you were going to be all right. But it was horrible. It was like living, I don't know how they lived in the 1800s, but I can only imagine. There were no street lights. All the leaves were off the trees. Imagine all the trees being bare. And at night, you can't see your hand in front of your face. And there was no food. You couldn't get money out the bank. Most people had, like me, I didn't take anything up to his house. So what I had to wash it every night. In a tub. In a tub with soap and water every night and hang it up to dry overnight. And finally, we drove to Jackson to get some clothes. It was a Kmart or something up here open. And we got some clothes, but it was like living a third world country. You would have to have been there to see this. It was dark. I'm talking about pitch, but people were using their car lights for light. People had generators going everywhere. Some people had generators. They had lights in their house, but I wasn't that fortunate. I lived in the dark for about 3 weeks.
Now, you were talking about some of the things, with people that had maybe a freezer full of meat and they had to cook it.
Yeah.
What was the personal interaction like during this time?
Okay. The one thing the storm did is brought all of us together. Everybody down there. There was no fussing, there was no fighting, there was no black, there was no white. We were all Gulf Coasters and we were all in this storm together. And people, if you passed by a place and people were cooking, they would call you to get you a plate. Because you had to cook the food was spoiling. There was always a barbecue, there was always a grill out. The hardest thing to get was gas and water. There were lines stretched, a mile long. You had to get in line to get some water and ice. And the guy came down from Clark, the Clark station. He had a little tube sticking out of one of his gas stations. He managed to do something to get the gas coming out. So people were standing in line with their gas can, and he had this little tube sticking down there giving gas away. I'm telling you, this really happened. I was there. I was in line with 2 5-gallon cans getting gas because you couldn't get around. You couldn't go nowhere without gas. You needed gas to get because the gas station couldn't run. The gas station run by electricity, That's how you pump the gas. Well, there was no electricity. So this guy figured out a way to stick this thing down in a tube and suck the gas out, and people were in line. He had to get out of the way because he couldn't sell it. The people were in line getting it. It must have been a mile long. And my wife and I, we stood there about an hour. I had 10 gallons, she had 10 gallons. We were walking down the streets like this about a mile with that gas. And it was a line of us walking. It was like living in the wild, wild west. I mean, because there were no lights, there was no food, but everybody helped everybody. It was a sad time, but it was a great time for camaraderie and just love. I mean, the Red Cross was there. They showed nothing but love, and people just was helping people. You could get help from anybody, man. I never want to go back through it again, but and when I think back on it, I think back on it as a lovable time because people really helped you out. You could get anything from anybody because we were all in together. Money didn't matter. It didn't matter how rich you were. If you didn't have a generator, you were just like me. Some people had generators, but a lot of people didn't. And I bet they sold 1 million generators after that storm because I bought one.
Yeah. So when you think about, when did you guys leave Gulfport? When did you decide to go to higher ground, as it were?
Well, my mother lives in Laurel, so I said, well, I'm going to go check on my mother because I'm here in this storm. Went straight up. Well, we left about 3 days later, and it took us for an hour and a half drive. It took me 4 hours to make it to Laurel because trees were all over 49. I had originally tried to leave the same day. After Katrina, I tried to leave that day. I said, I'm getting away from down here. This is crazy. But one of the guys who were cutting trees said, man, it's like this all the way to Jackson. Ain't nobody got no power. You might as well stay here. So I waited 3 days and left, and it took me 4 hours to get to Laurel, and they still didn't have no power. No power in Hattiesburg, no power in Laurel, no power in Stone County. It was like that for a long time. And I told you about people were eating those MREs, they call it. That's military food. You ever had one?
Yeah.
Did you in the military?
My dad was.
Okay. Well, you tear it zip off, and it's got a thing that activates in the bottom and start heating the food up. But what they don't tell you is that it makes you constipated because it's for the guys that's out in the field. It's not for civilians, but that's all we had. And they were passing them out, and man, some of them were quite tasty.
Especially after being out there with no power.
Some of them were quite tasty. But the National Guard they were friendly. FEMA was friendly. Everything. And the thing that made the people on the coast real mad is the coverage that New Orleans got, and that we didn't get. They were really mad about that because New Orleans really didn't get hit by the hurricane. They were fine the day after the storm. Their levees broke. We caught that hurricane, and a lot of people died on the coast. They were finding bodies 5 days, 10 days afterwards. It was horrible. And they put an X on the house, and you knew somebody died in there. It was bad.
Was that weird to go by and see houses that you knew people that lived there?
I knew one older guy that I went to church with. I think he died in a house. He drowned in something. Water got really high. He stayed pretty close to that beach area. You couldn't go to the beach. I told you that. Mm-hmm. Well, you could right after the storm. We went right at the day after the storm. I got in my car and we explored because you could move around then. And people were out there on the beach picking up quarters. They were everywhere because casinos had that money in them, quarters in them. So of course they brought the National Guard down there and stopped that and put barbed wire across the railroad tracks. The railroad track in Gulfport, Biloxi, you go over to get to the beach area. Well, the barbed wire was that right there. You couldn't go there. It was devastating. Half of 90 was missing. I mean, you could go down 90 and a half mile was missing. Just saying. Wasn't no road no more. It was gone. It washed away. And the casinos, those big barges, that's why they changed. Those things were all in the neighborhood. You could see them. I'd never seen nothing that big. I said, my God, is this how big it is? Because we went all the time. And it was a crazy time, man. Things that stood there were no more. There was a hotel in Gulfport that got washed away. A hotel, apartments on the beach, nothing left but slabs. Water reaches its own level. Now they're building them houses so high down there, but to me it's self-defeating. If that water gets that high, it's gonna wash that house away. But you'd have to be there to understand how primitive it was. It was like living in a third world country. You know, people were scrapping for ice and water, and the Red Cross would come down and cook every day. The Red Cross would cook a meal, but we mainly let the elder eat that. You know, if you weren't 65 or older, we didn't go get that food. We ate those little things they gave us. Needless that I know that they would get you constipated. We ate that.
Well, and thinking about it now, in the 20 years since, have you seen anything that even compared?
No. Well, I know they've had some storms. What is it, Ida, and they had a bad one over there in Lake Charles, and they've had some bad storms. But I just don't think they compare to Katrina. Katrina, by the time it hit land, it was not a 5-category storm. It was a 3. But what made Katrina so devastating is how big it was. It was massive, and it moved slow. It hit the coast at 4 o'clock and didn't leave the coast till 5 o'clock the next day. That's how big and massive it was. And you know, look how it tore up Jackson and up here. It was, and no, I hadn't seen anything like it. I don't want to see it. I don't like it. I hope to never see another hurricane.
Now, did you tell me, are you moving back to the coast?
Yes, I am.
What do you think about that?
I love the coast. I don't want to live anyplace else. You know, down there, we're used to the storms. It's part of the, you know, it goes with the DNA when you move there. You know, if you're scared of the storm, don't come to the coast. You know, it's like it's what my dad told me when I told him I wanted to buy a truck. He said, if you're worried about gas, don't buy a truck. So I love the coast, and I know it's a possibility we may get another storm. But I'm not afraid of it because I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave. I will never stay again. I'll leave. And they come up here too, so you know. So I'm not worried about that, but I am going back to the coast.
Now, I guess when you think about it, if you had to just sum it all up in like one paragraph, what will you always remember about the days that you spent during Hurricane Katrina?
One paragraph, it would be living like in a third world country, but also the love that everybody showed for each other. Black, white, green, brown, and red. It was just love down there. And the Christian people that came, what's his name? Billy Graham people, and any kind of faith leader you know had people there. And they sing at night, and you know, and they had little campfires, and they would barbecue, invite people, and pray. You know, I don't want to go back through it, but it wasn't all bad.
Awesome. Anything else you'd want people to know that I wouldn't know to ask you?
No, I think we've covered it all. You know, Katrina was a devastating storm. I think it was the worst storm that ever hit Mississippi. And I remember Camille. You know, I'm old enough to remember that. I was in Laurel. We lived through that, but Camille was a bad storm. It messed up the Gulf Coast, but not like Katrina.
Do you feel like there were people who thought they could stay through Katrina because they stayed through Camille and they were fine?
Well, some people died in Camille that thought they could stay too. Well, you always gonna have people like that. You know, that they call them having hurricane parties that don't respect Mother Nature. Yeah, I think people did that, and I think people died in New Orleans too. You know, and I got a friend that, man, do he have a horror story in New Orleans? He didn't go to Lake Charles when his wife did, and he had to swim all night long, held onto a log in New Orleans. His name is Brian. I'm gonna get him and let him tell you a story one day.
I'd love to hear that.
His name is Brian. He'll tell you. It was bad down there.
So what do you think? Does this happen again, even bigger someday?
I think it will. I think we're ripe for something big to happen. I just don't think it needs to happen in Mississippi.
Please no.
No, we've had ours, but I think another one will. And you know, I don't know where it's going to happen, but I think we're ripe for something else to happen. I mean, these things have been happening since the beginning of time. Mm-hmm. So.
All right. Well, and for those of us that want to follow you in your next journey when you move to the coast, how do we find you?
Well, you can find me on IG, on Facebook, Tyrone Davis, that's my name, and on TikTok. all your streaming networks. And just stay tuned. I'll let you know. I'll let you know so you can tell everybody on Dark Horse, okay?
Good. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Tyrone.
Thank you for having me here.
Absolutely.
All right.